picture this, right? You're sitting in a cramped New York City apartment. Your heart is just hammering furiously against your ribs.
Yeah.
You're drenched in cold sweat, and you feel this overwhelming, like, suffocating sense of panic.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to stop it? I mean, for most people, maybe it's deep breathing or calling a friend.
Right, the usual grounding techniques.
Exactly. But what if the most effective way to short-circuit that panic attack was to grab a raw, blood-red chili pepper and just eat it whole?
I mean, it sounds like an act of self-sabotage, honestly, but biologically, it is actually a brilliant neurological hack.
It's wild.
Yeah, you are intentionally using a fake physical crisis to force your body to abandon a very real psychological one.
And that profound intersection between the visceral reality of human biology, the raw power of nature, and the psychological weight of trauma, that is exactly what we are exploring today.
Definitely.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, and joined as always by our resident expert. And today, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack Tara K Menon's incredible narrative, Underwater.
It's such a heavy but beautifully complex piece of work.
It really is. The source material weaves between a childhood spent in a remote Thai island paradise, the sudden devastating reality of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and then the protagonist's PTSD-riddled life in New York City years later as Hurricane Sandy approaches.
Right. And we're going to explore how modern society expends a massive amount of energy trying to, sanitize both trauma and the natural world just to make them palatable.
Because the overarching theme of these sources is control, right?
Absolutely. We are obsessed with the illusion that we can manage the uncontrollable, whether that's an incoming storm or the complex ecosystem of a coral reef, or even just the messy, unquantifiable grief of losing someone you love.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the story introduces this obsession with control right away through the protagonist, Marissa.
Right.
She works at a luxury travel magazine called Cortez, and her literal job is to package paradise.
Yeah.
She gets this lime green Post-it note from her editor demanding, and this is in all caps, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, feels.
The ultimate sensory checklist for tourists.
Exactly.
Oh.
And she's expected to churn out these glossy cliches about spellbinding blue water and unblemished sand for wealthy travelers.
But the thing is, she knows the region intimately. She grew up there.
Yeah.
So to cope with the absurdity of her job, she starts writing what she calls B-side copy.
The B-sides. I love that concept.
It's so compelling. She scours the internet for the gritty, unfiltered reality of these destinations. She finds photos of, like, an old woman butchering chickens in the Philippines or working children in Sri Lanka.
Or those thick belts of plastic bottles just floating in the ocean.
Right. And she prints these out, staples them to her polished articles, and then hides them in her desk drawer.
Now, I have to push back a little on why she's forced to hide them, Is the magazine industry actively afraid of nature? Or is this just pure capitalism?
That's a great question.
Because people pay thousands of dollars for a vacation to escape their stressful lives, not to be reminded of global poverty and ocean pollution.
Well, sure, they want an escape.
Writing this luxury travel copy isn't just putting a heavy Instagram filter over reality. It's more like, building a luxury spa on an active fault line. You're taking the pleasant byproduct, the hot springs, and actively demanding that everyone ignore the tectonic plates shifting violently right beneath their feet.
What's fascinating here is that the capitalism aspect and the psychological fear are deeply intertwined.
How so?
We commodify nature specifically because acknowledging its true, indifferent power is terrifying. If we can buy it, if we can review it on a 5-star scale, we feel we have mastery over it.
Ah, right. It's about feeling in charge.
Exactly. And the text highlights this historical drive for mastery with the story of Mauritius and the dodo bird.
Oh, this part was wild.
When Dutch sailors discovered the dodo at the end of the 16th century, the birds had evolved with 0 natural predators. They literally didn't possess the biological mechanism of fear.
Which made them incredibly easy targets. They just walked right up to the sailors.
Right. But it wasn't just hunting that doomed them. It was the human introduction of invasive species like pigs and rats that completely destroyed their ground nests.
That's so sad.
Within less than 100 years of human contact, they were extinct. And the text notes this was the first time in recorded history that humanity realized it possessed the capacity to completely eradicate an entire species. It shattered the illusion that the earth was endlessly bountiful and indestructible.
Yet we still try to domesticate the wild today, just in more insidious ways.
Very much so.
Later in the text, Marissa is in a New York hardware store looking at paint swatches. She's staring at colors with these benign domestic names like minced onion and coral dust.
Coral dust?
Yeah, coral dust is this warm, muted, comforting color. It's the kind of color you'd paint a newborn's nursery. But she grew up freediving in the Andaman Sea. She knows the electrifying, almost violent vibrancy of real living coral reefs.
And she also knows the biological reality of what is happening to those reefs right now. When coral is subjected to severe temperature stress from climate change, it undergoes a process called bleaching.
The ghost reefs.
Exactly. The coral polyps literally expel the symbiotic algae, they're called zooxanthellae, that live inside their tissues. These algae are what give the coral its brilliant color, but more importantly, they provide the coral with its primary food source through photosynthesis.
So when they turn that ghostly, dusty white, they are actively starving to death.
Precisely. We extract a pleasant aesthetic from a complex ecosystem, name a paint swatch after it to decorate our safe, climate-controlled homes, all while that very ecosystem is undergoing mass starvation due to our actions.
It's the ultimate sanitization of reality.
It really is.
Which brings us back to that New York apartment and how the protagonist copes when she can no longer sanitize her own reality.
The chili pepper.
Yes, she's carrying immense trauma from surviving the 2004 tsunami. She wakes up from horrific nightmares, slick with sweat.
And that brings us to the chili pepper grounding technique. How does eating a raw chili actually stop a trauma response? It comes down to a specific chemical compound called capsaicin and how it interacts with the human nervous system.
Okay.
When she bites into that chili, the capsaicin binds to a specific type of receptor in her mouth called TRPV1.
And those receptors are usually responsible for detecting literal physical heat, right? Like if you drink scalding tea.
Correct. The capsaicin essentially picks the lock on those receptors. It tricks her brain into genuinely believing she has swallowed fire.
That is incredible.
Her brain immediately registers a massive life-threatening physical injury. It dumps endorphins into her bloodstream to block the pain, dilates her blood vessels, and forces her to start sweating to cool her body temperature down.
So it completely overrides the psychological panic of her PTSD nightmare because her biology is screaming, forget the bad dream, our mouth is literally on fire.
Yes.
She starts sweating, her heart rate spikes, and she has to suck in these massive gulps of cool air. The text actually notes the Mayans had a specific word for this sharp intake of breath, huyub.
And that deep breathing is the final step of the hack. Once the brain realizes there is no actual tissue damage, that the mouth isn't literally burning the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest functions, kicks in.
To bring the body back to a baseline state.
Exactly. She uses this intense, fabricated physical danger to force her nervous system to hit the reset button.
Humans have such a complex, almost absurd relationship with the natural world. I mean, even the name chili pepper is a prime example of our need to force things into neat, understandable boxes.
Oh, absolutely.
Christopher Columbus is the reason we call them that. He was funded by the Spanish crown to find a new trade route to India, specifically to secure lucrative black pepper.
Right.
When he hit the Americas instead and found this spicy fruit, he just slapped the name pepper on it to lessen the blow of his massive geographical failure and appease his investors.
He fundamentally misunderstood what he had discovered, but named it anyway to assert control. And that theme of misunderstanding and exploiting nature brings us to a crucial biological symbol in the narrative, the manta ray.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Marissa and her best friend, Arielle, grew up studying manta rays. They're highly intelligent, possessing the largest brains of all fish.
It's amazing.
They have distinct personalities and unique black Rorschach-like markings on their white bellies.
Oh.
But they have this one evolutionary trait that makes them incredibly vulnerable. They are what marine biologists call negatively buoyant.
Right. Unlike many fish, manta rays do not have a swim bladder.
A swim bladder being the thing that keeps them afloat.
Yeah, a gas-filled organ that allows fish to maintain their depth without floating upward or sinking. Because mantas are denser than the water around them, if they stop actively swimming, they sink to the ocean floor.
But it's even more dire than just sinking, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. Because of how their gills function, they rely on ram ventilation. They have to constantly swim forward with their mouths open to force oxygenated water over their gills.
Wow.
If they stop moving, they don't just sink, they asphyxiate. They are biologically condemned to a life of perpetual motion.
Is there a more perfect biological metaphor for surviving trauma? If you stop moving, if you stop swimming, you literally drown.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text brilliantly uses these ecological realities to mirror the human experience of survival, but it also highlights the tragic intersection of human greed and animal vulnerability.
Because these majestic creatures are aggressively poached.
Largely for their gold plates, yes.
The text describes this heartbreaking undercover video shot in Guangzhou, China, at a traditional Chinese medicine market. Massive piles of dried manta ray gills are being sold under the completely false promise that they cure everything from acne to cancer.
It's devastating.
There's even a young mother in the video who bought them hoping it would help with breastfeeding.
And the bitter, tragic irony of this comes back to how the manta ray survives. Because they are filter feeders, constantly moving massive volumes of ocean water through their gills to extract plankton, their gills act like highly efficient sponges for oceanic pollution.
Oh no.
Scientific studies have shown that manta ray gill plates contain dangerously high levels of toxic heavy metals, specifically arsenic, cadmium, and lead.
So people are buying a supposed miracle cure, paying exorbitant prices for the slaughtered parts of an endangered, highly intelligent animal, and they are literally feeding themselves and their infants heavy metal poison.
It's a devastating cycle of ignorance.
It really is. And you see this theme of ecosystems violently forced out of balance everywhere in the text, even in the middle of New York City. Marissa observes red-eared slider turtles sunning themselves in Central Park. It looks picturesque, almost quaint, but they don't belong there.
Not at all. They are an intensely invasive species. Over 52 million of them were exported globally as pets from the United States.
52 million?
Yes. And when people got tired of them, they dumped them in local waterways. Now, they are aggressively crowding out native turtle species all over the world.
And the Quaker parrots. This part blew my mind.
Oh, the parrots. Yeah.
These are birds native to the warm climates of South America, but somehow a wild population established itself in freezing New York City.
Right, in Brooklyn and Queens.
How do they survive the winter? They build these massive, multifamily communal nests directly on city electrical structures. They are literally siphoning the ambient electromagnetic heat radiating off the transformers to keep your chicks warm.
But the consequence is that their nests act as heavy insulation, occasionally causing those city transformers to overheat and explode, knocking out power to thousands of New Yorkers.
It's such a striking contrast.
It is. You have the extreme fragility of individual species like the dodo or the manta ray, juxtaposed with the brutal, unstoppable, highly adaptable resilience of life itself. Nature will use our own infrastructure against us to survive.
Which provides a perfect transition into the human side of this narrative.
Yeah.
Because just as society categorizes animals as either native or invasive, pets or pests, ignoring the messy reality of the ecosystem, society also categorizes and polices human grief.
Oh, heavily.
Marissa is entirely consumed by grief. It dictates her every waking moment, but her grief doesn't fit into the neat, recognizable boxes that society deems acceptable.
Right, she isn't mourning a spouse or a parent or a child.
She is mourning her best friend, Arielle, who was swept away in the tsunami.
And this creates a profound central tension. Marissa has a massive 9-inch white scar across her stomach from being battered by the wave.
Yeah.
When people in New York see it, they ask if she lost family in the disaster. When she says no or clarifies that she lost a friend, she literally watches the pity drain out of their eyes, replaced by a palpable sense of relief.
Like, oh, it wasn't a real loss.
Exactly. The unspoken societal expectation is that if it was, quote unquote, just a friend, she should have gotten over it by now.
Think about that for a second. If you think about the people in your life right now, the ones you'd actually call in a crisis, the ones who truly know you, how many of them are just friends?
Most of them, for a lot of people.
Right. Why is it that our culture elevates romantic and familial love to the absolute top of the pyramid, but treats platonic friendship as something secondary? It's treated as a placeholder until you find a spouse.
It really is.
It's exactly like the B-side travel copy we talked about earlier. Platonic devastation is a reality decorate. Society forces us to hide in a desk drawer because it makes the people around us uncomfortable.
This raises an important question about the sociology of mourning and how language inherently limits our emotional processing.
What do you mean by that?
Well, societal structures historically prioritize the nuclear family because the nuclear family drives economic productivity and property transfer. Spouses and children have legal and financial standing. Best friends do not.
Ah, I see.
Because platonic love lacks this structural weight, our language literally lacks the vocabulary to articulate its loss. As the text explicitly notes, our language for profound grief is entirely tainted by the love and loss of lovers.
Which is why Marissa has to turn to historical literature to feel seen. She finds a copy of Alfred Lord Tennyson's famous poem, In Memoriam.
Right.
Tennyson wrote this epic, deeply moving elegy to mourn his male best friend, Arthur Hallam. And what does Marissa do? She sits in her room with a black marker, violently slashing out the he and him pronouns in the book and writing in she and her so she can finally have a vocabulary for her platonic grief for Arielle.
And yet, even Tennyson's grief is misinterpreted by modern readers. Marissa listens to a college classmate boldly assert that Tennyson must have been secretly romantically involved with Hallam.
I just can't fathom it.
The classmate simply cannot comprehend that a person could be that emotionally shattered over a friend. Societal structures require grief to have a neat expiration date, especially for non-familial ties, so that the individual can return to being a productive member of society.
It is entirely disenfranchised grief. She also finds solace in a quote by C.S. Lewis, who was writing about the death of his wife. He wrote, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear." And for Marissa, that fear is entirely physical. Because she survived the tsunami, she has a terrifying, involuntary nervous system reaction to low rumbling engines like a passing truck or a generator.
That's because the brain hardwires auditory triggers to trauma. That low, steady rumbling perfectly mimics the acoustic frequency of the approaching wave.
So her body literally thinks it's happening again.
Yes. It isn't just a memory. Her brain registers the sound as an immediate life or death threat. Which brings us to the climax of the narrative, where the external dread of an incoming natural disaster perfectly mirrors her internal unresolved grief.
Right. We jump to October 2012. Hurricane Sandy is bearing down on New York City. And the juxtaposition between how New York prepares for a storm and how the tsunami actually arrived in Thailand is jarring.
It's completely different.
In New York, it's a total media spectacle. Weathermen are hyping the storm for ratings, and New Yorkers are treating it like a cozy inconvenience, panic buying Halloween skull candles, and artisanal cheese at gourmet supermarkets.
And consider how we name these storms. Until 1978, the United States only named hurricanes after women. Now they alternate male, female, male, female.
Yeah?
We even retire the names of particularly deadly storms, as if removing the name Hurricane Gilbert or Hurricane Joan from a list somehow punishes the weather.
So what does this all mean? It is humanity's absurd, ultimately futile attempt to personify and control the atmosphere. We assign a human name, like Sandy, to a devastating vortex of wind and water to make it feel understandable, to make it feel like something we can negotiate with.
Right.
But as Marissa knows intimately, the ocean doesn't care what you named it.
It really doesn't. She remembers the morning of December 26, 2004 in Thailand. There was no media hysteria. There was no warning whatsoever. It was a pristine, cloudless morning. The sky was a brilliant aquamarine, but long before the water moved, the animals knew.
Oh man, the animal prescience described in this text will make the hair on your arm stand up.
It's incredible.
Marissa remembers walking outside and realizing it was dead silent. Every single bird had abandoned the trees. A local stray dog was running in frantic circles, howling in absolute, delirious anguish, begging anyone who would listen to follow it away from the beach.
And there was a tourist elephant. It was giving a ride to a little girl when it suddenly stopped in the middle of the road.
It just stopped.
Completely ignored the strikes and commands of its handler. It raised its trunk, let out a sound that witnesses described as a terrifying cry, and then abruptly bolted inland, charging toward high ground, saving itself and the little girl on its back.
How is that possible? I mean, how did they know?
Infrasound. Many animals, including elephants and dogs, can hear acoustic frequencies far below the capability of the human ear. A massive seismic event, like the earthquake that triggered the tsunami, generates infrasonic waves that travel through the earth faster than the water travels across the ocean.
So they felt it coming.
The animals literally felt the tectonic plates tear open, and they felt the massive barometric pressure change of the approaching wave. Not a single free-moving wild animal died that day. They all evacuated.
But the humans stayed.
Yeah.
They stayed because they were entranced by the spectacle. The text describes the physical arrival of the wave, and it didn't look like a standard wave crashing. First, the ocean receded. It pulled back miles, draining the bay entirely, exposing the complex coral reefs and leaving hundreds of fish flopping wildly on the wet sand.
This is a crucial, terrifying piece of tsunami physics. A tsunami is not a surface wave caused by wind. It is a massive displacement of the entire water column from the ocean floor to the surface.
Right.
When the wave approaches the shore, the trough, the lowest leading edge of the seismic wave, often reaches land first. It acts like an unfathomably large vacuum, pulling the coastal water out to sea to build the towering crest of the incoming wave.
What did the tourists do? They ran toward the exposed ocean floor. They thought it was a curiosity. They were picking up the flopping fish.
It's the ultimate fatal misunderstanding of nature.
And then the horizon literally lifted into the sky and slingshot back as a towering black wall of water.
Marissa survives, but the sensory horror of the aftermath is something the glossy news cameras completely sanitize. The narrative takes us into a makeshift morgue at the local Buddhist temple.
Yeah.
The sheer scale of the bodies, bloating and turning black under the tropical sun, creates a sensory reality that is incredibly difficult to process, particularly the smell.
It's a detail you read once and it stays with you forever.
When human tissue undergoes severe decomposition, it releases two specific organic chemical compounds, putrescine and cadaverine. These are diamines produced by the breakdown of amino acids.
Just the names alone.
Yeah. When they mix in large concentrations, the odor is indescribably horrific. It physically assaults the nervous system.
To try and cope, the survivors were tearing up pieces of cloth, soaking them in tiger balm and tying them around their faces. But the stench cut right through the menthol. It was so bad, Marissa was hyperventilating.
It's just overwhelming.
But then a local body collector sees her struggling and teaches her a deeply counterintuitive biological trick. He tells her she has to take off the mask and aggressively, deeply inhale the putrid air 5 times in a row. She has to pull the scent of death entirely into her lungs.
And the reason this works relies on a biological mechanism called olfactory fatigue.
Right.
By aggressively and repeatedly inhaling the scent, she rapidly saturates the odorant receptors in her nasal cavity. The brain essentially realizes the stimulus is constant, overwhelming, and no longer offering new information, so it abruptly turns the signal off.
Wow.
She literally had to force her brain into scent blindness to stop tasting death.
And mixed in with this unimaginable visceral horror are these surreal, almost absurd visual details of human commodification. The receding water didn't just leave bodies, it left the detritus of our packaged paradise scattered among them. The text describes brightly colored, discarded pink sun hats. It describes cardboard candy canes and strings of red and green Christmas tinsel tangled intimately with human remains.
Perhaps the most haunting detail of all is the description of a famous photograph taken by a Swedish tourist as the wave hit.
Oh, this picture.
The background of the photo is the terrifying, towering wall of water, seconds away from destroying everything. In the foreground, you see people reacting. Some are sprinting away in sheer terror.
Naturally.
But one man is just standing there facing the wave. He is completely still, seemingly awestruck, fixed in wonder at the sheer spectacle of his own demise.
He couldn't process the reality of the danger until it was too late.
Which brings us to the true meaning of the word apocalypse. As the news stations in New York flash dramatic blood-red banners warning of an apocalyptic storm regarding Hurricane Sandy, the text reminds us of the word's actual etymology.
Right, from the Greek.
It comes from the ancient Greek apokalypten. It does not mean destruction. It does not mean disaster. It means to uncover, to disclose, to reveal.
To reveal.
Yes. Disasters don't really destroy. Their primary function is that they strip away our illusions. They strip away the luxury travel brochures, the coral dust paint swatches, and the artisanal cheese. They reveal the raw, unvarnished truth of our absolute fragile vulnerability on this planet.
To bring this all together, this deep dive into underwater shows us that humanity expends a monumental amount of energy trying to build walls against reality.
We do.
Whether we are looking at the forced, sanitized cheer of a luxury travel magazine, the socially policed, misunderstood mourning of a best friend, or the obsessive, categorized news coverage of an incoming hurricane, we are desperately trying to control the uncontrollable.
But nature doesn't care.
Exactly. Nature, both the physical environment of the ocean and the internal psychological landscape of human grief, is indifferent to our categories. It's powerful, and it demands to be felt. You cannot put an Instagram filter over an active fault line, and you cannot put a socially acceptable expiration date on grief.
When the wave comes, the water strips everything bare.
It really does. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. If the word apocalypse simply means to reveal, What would a personal apocalypse reveal about the structures of your own life?
That's a heavy question.
If the water came and stripped all the pleasantries away today, which B-side truths of your relationships and your environment would be left standing on the sand? Think about that solitary, pristine deck chair waiting for you on the beach. And what might really be lurking just beneath that spellbinding blue water.